Well, I suppose one reason why we're here is because we feel betrayed. We feel betrayed about promises and mechanisms that were set up back in 2006 in order to deal with pensions. We feel frustrated because we are being blamed for something that is not our problem. Teachers, university lecturers, PCS workers, we're not the cause of this crisis. And yet, we get blamed for this all the time, as does the public sector generally. We're also disillusioned. We're disillusioned with a government that makes us, or is trying to make us pay for that crisis. And even Mervyn King, the Governor of the Bank of England, recognises that it's unfair to blame public sector workers for a crisis which was not their making. And Mervyn King is not what you'd call a militant trade unionist. And finally, we're here today because we're angry. We're angry because public sector workers are very mindful of looking to the future. We spend our lives caring and providing services for the public. And part of what we do is also think about ourselves in the future. And we save. We save through pension schemes. And now we're being put into a situation where our saving plans are being threatened by a government that appears to want to blame us for something that was not our problem. Now, as I said earlier, I'll be speaking between speakers from time to time. But what I'd like to do now is introduce Ian Lever, who's Secretary for Leicestershire National Union of Teachers and also National Executive Member for the Midlands region. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I don't need to do a kind of Joey Ramone style stance here, I think. Yeah. I've been thinking about what I was going to say at this rally, actually for quite a long time, well before the rally was planned. Actually way back kind of in April, really, when it became absolutely clear that the government was going to break its promise not to affect teachers and other public sector workers' accrued rights, which they did back in April. They did that when they changed the indexing of people's pensions from RPI to CPI. So the idea that talks are still ongoing, which of course they are, but yet they haven't introduced any changes yet, is simply not true, because they have started that already, and that is already affecting existing pensioners, not people who have not yet taken their pension. To be honest, I shouldn't really be short of things to say. Every time Michael Gove opens his mouth, he comes out with something even more ludicrous than the last time. Or he ends up giggling on Radio 4. I don't know whether you heard that the other week, but it was just embarrassing to listen to. I actually had a head teacher ask me just the other week whether the NUT was paying Michael Gove to say this stuff. You would wonder, really. You only have to look at this turnout, even though it's looking a bit blustery and what have you, but to look at the turnout here, hundreds of people here now, to know that teachers are furious. They're angry at the proposals that are being made, and they're clearly angry at the fact that there is no intention by the government to discuss this in any kind of serious and sensible way. I was also mindful, when I was thinking of what to say today, of the last time the NUT was involved in strike action like this, when we had that rally at the Athena, when we had a one-day strike over pay. And we were lucky then to have the wonderful Mark Steele talking to us then. I didn't dare invite Mark Steele again. I thought I might be pushing my luck to try and persuade him and come and talk to us again. But instead I thought actually I might just cheat in terms of doing this speech and read out his article from last week's Independent, his column in last week's Independent. I'm sure there are people here who've read it actually, but I think it's worth listening to again. I don't think I won't make any attempt to match Mark's comic timing. I shall just read the article out. It's entitled, No Wonder Firemen Are on the Rich Lists. Let me just sort this out first. How's the government getting away with this idea that public sector pension is a luxury? Is it something that suave bachelors could show off, saying, once I've taken you for a spin in my Aston Martin, how about I show you the mid-range forecast for my teacher's pension over a bottle of Veuve Clicquot? A pension is a necessity. So you might as well say, we simply can't go on enjoying the luxury of a sewage system, given that the amount of waste we're flushing is 35% higher than it was in 1996. So from 2015, you've got to throw it all out the window, otherwise we'll end up like Greece. Also, a pension is part of a wage. It's not an added-on bonus. Employers don't come round to schools and fire stations once a month, slipping a bundle of notes into each member of staff's pocket, whispering, "Here you are, darling, get yourself something nice." The next complaint will be public sector workers who enjoy the privilege of spending all day in job centres and prisons paid for by the taxpayer are also paid money to spend on things, it was revealed in a shock inside report today. But apparently these pensions are gold-plated, and it's where all our money has gone. So when you read that the richest 1,000 people in the country increased their wealth last year by 60 billion, number 34 on that list must be Alf, a retired fireman from Ipswich, who now lives in Cannes on a boat he outbid Roman Abramovich for, and holds parties where he uses his skills to spray cocktails into everybody's glass from a hose. Number 49 will be Beryl, a retired midwife who's planning to buy Tottenham Hotspur when she can mount a challenge to the current chief shareholder, Amy, the retired lollipop lady from Workington. One of the most infuriating arguments to justify cutting pensions is that private sector workers don't have them, so why should anyone else? It's a strange way of assessing society that if someone is badly treated, then everyone else might as well be, otherwise it's not fair. Maybe the answer to the scandal in these care homes would be for people of all ages to be left for 2 hours face down in a bowl of cold soup, and then it'd be nice and equal. Instead, the public sector unions asked their members if they wanted to take action against these cuts, and overwhelmingly they said they do. It's argued by various politicians that the strikes are a stupid tactic as they make unions unpopular. Presumably unions should adapt to the model climate by no longer bothering with issues such as their members being asked to work 3 extra years for no money, and instead bring in colouring books and grow watercress. Strangely, the unions have rejected the advice of people who can't stand them anyway, and have gone along with the vote of their members, because we do seem to be in a battle between opposite ways of seeing society. For example, there's the view of the caller on a phone-in this week who supported the rise in tuition fees because he said, "I haven't got kids, so why should I pay for other kids' education?" One answer to this is to point out that education benefits all of society, not just students, and to suggest a mild redistribution of wealth would make such facilities affordable, and at the same time is looking after people once they've retired. But a better response, I think, is to say, "Oh really? I bet you see kids in a playground squealing with delight and think, bah, I'm not paying for those swings and that climbing frame, it's not fair, you miserable, cynical, poxy, selfish pile of sludge." Well, seeing as you've got no kids, I don't suppose a soul will turn up to your funeral, but that better not mean you get a pauper's one, because the taxpayer will have to fork out for that. But I wonder why that's probably why I won't be a very successful politician. So that's Mark Steele here in his article, if not in presence. To be honest, I wish Mark Steele was a politician. He might show a little bit more backbone than a lot of the politicians in support of what we're doing here and up and down the country today. So thank you for turning up. Stay for the band, stay for the rest of the speeches, and enjoy the afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. The next speaker is from a union which is on strike today, but unlike the NUT and ATL, this is not the first day of their strike. This union, the PCS, has been on strike for some considerable time, and their members are facing increasing difficulties as a result. But I'd like to introduce Tony Church, who is Secretary for UCU. Thank you.
Well, actually, let's just clarify. I'm from PCS. And I'm also convener of an organisation called Leicestershire Against the Cuts, which was an initiative that PCS took last summer in advance of understanding that this sort of event would become the norm, that we would start to see ordinary working people saying, we didn't create the crisis that has led to the situation where we're told that there is a deficit in Britain that must be paid off immediately. As Andy says, this is probably my 30th day of strike action in about 5 years. And that affects my pension as well, because I lose a pension for every day, a day off my pension. But I still think it's important that we're here today. We're here showing this government that we're not going to pay for the crisis not of our making. This week, I was on Radio Leicester, and Ben Jackson, the morning presenter, when I said to him, when I came into the civil service 40 years ago, I knew that I wouldn't get the sort of pay I might get in the private sector. I wasn't going to get share options. I wasn't going to get a company car. I wasn't going to get a banker-style bonus. But I was told, continually told, I had job security and I had a decent pension to look forward to when I retired. And that's my remuneration package. And Ben Jackson said to me, but the world's changed over 40 years, hasn't it? And I said to him, not if you're rich. The world hasn't changed at all if you're rich. If you're rich, you're still actually coining it in on the backs of people who are being made to pay for crises that they didn't actually create. And is that greedy? Because I'm getting fed up of being told that actually stopping somebody putting their hand in my pocket and stealing money out of my pocket is being greedy. Well, if that's the case, every time somebody's house is burgled, you can say that they're being greedy in reporting it to the police. Because the burglar ought to be able to take away your prized possessions. And this is a government who I consider to be burglars. They are stealing from us. They are stealing from us. And let's not be 2 points about that. They are stealing. But of course, pensions are a cut. The reason they want to cut pensions is because they want it to be able to pay bankers their big bonuses. They want to be able to keep the banks afloat. Well, I have a message for Lord Hutton. Lord Hutton, Sir Fred Goodwin, ex-chairman of the Royal Bank of Scotland, one of the people who paid casino banking with other people's money, lost other people's money, and then said, well, sorry about that, I'll have to go, won't I? Yes, but here you are, here's a pension of £345,000 a year for actually bringing the country to its knees. Now, Lord Hutton, are you going to deal with people like Fred Goodwin? We're all in this together, we're told. Well, let me say this. I don't see my interests being the same as 30 members of the cabinet are all millionaires. I don't see my interests as being the same as people who are educated on the fields of Eton and in the elite colleges of Oxford and Cambridge. I'm an ordinary bloke. I was brought up in Leicester. I went into the civil service because I actually believe that there is a public sector ethic. I actually believe in looking after my fellow man and woman and child. I believe in that ethic. And every one of us here today believes in that ethic, or else we wouldn't be working in the public sector. That's why we're here. We believe in a public sector ethic. But let's say we want to be treated fairly. We want to be treated properly. We are ordinary people who want to be able to say we're being treated properly. So I don't believe I'm being greedy. I don't believe I'm being unreasonable. But I have to say, it pains me when the leader of the Labour Party actually says you're wrong to go on strike. Well, Ed, what's your answer to that? Tell us to get round the negotiating table. Well, we are around the negotiating table, but we're negotiating with people like Danny Alexander, who tells us, please come and negotiate. But oh, by the way, it doesn't matter, because we're going to implement Hutton anyway. Well, that's not negotiation. That's a sham. That's a sham, and that's a farce. And we have to say, we're not going to put up with that farce. And I have to say this to Ed Miliband. There'll be people on this park today who are Labour Party members. There'll be people who supported Labour. There'll be people who've actually put you into power. Do you think they did that so that you can tell them that they ought to just knuckle down and accept what the Tories and the Liberal Democrats are telling them? Of course not. And that raises a question in my mind. Whose interest do you represent, Mr. Miliband? Whose interest are you there for? I know who I represent. I represent members today, or up and down the country, together with comrades from the NUT, from the ATL, from the UCU, who have said, this is enough. Before I came here, we had a short rally at New Walk, bottom of New Walk, and many, many unions were saying, this is only the start, and we expect to be with you in the autumn. We expect to be standing shoulder to shoulder. 750,000 people, up to 750,000 people have been on strike today. When Unison, when Unite, when other unions come on board, that will swell to 4 to 5 million. If you don't understand, Mr. Miliband, that you need to put your support behind the people who put you in power, and not the class enemy, not behind the Camerons of this world, not behind the Cleggs of this world, but the people who put you into power, then you can't expect those people to put you into power in the future. By ye friends you shall be known. It's an old phrase. So let me just finish on this. I think today has been the start. I think today has been magnificent. As I said, 30 days in the last 5 years. And somebody from PCS will probably tell me it's more than that. I thought they would, but that's my estimation anyway. But it's the best day I've ever seen. We've had senior managers who've joined the union this week to come out on strike. And that tells me something. That tells me that we are shifting. Radio Leicester ran a straw poll this morning, recorded, I think, in the High Cross yesterday. And I don't want to stigmatise it, but from the amount of Leicester accents that I heard, I think they were ordinary working class people who were being asked their opinion. And 4 out of 5 of those said that they totally supported what we were doing. So don't believe this myth tonight on the media that only 1 in 4 civil servants came out on strike. Don't believe this myth that job centres were open. The doors might be open, but the staff in there is minimal. People are being told to ring back tomorrow. People are being told, there's a strike, can you come back tomorrow? Now that says to me, this is a propaganda war. There's a propaganda war we're going to win. Because the workers united can never be defeated. That's one phrase. And another phrase I'm very, very fond of. And it's a Spanish phrase, and I apologise if you were on the May Day march, but it's a phrase I love. And it's hasta la victoria siempre. And it means always until victory. And that's what we're seeing today. This is always until victory. United, we will win. United, we must win. And we will go forward together. The 4 unions today, the battalions of many more in the future. We will win. We will win. We will win. Just remember that, Cameron. We will win. We will win. You will lose. And please, Mr. Miliband, recognise that if you don't change your ways, you will lose too. Because the Workers United will never be defeated. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm always tempted in a situation like that when a speaker's gone down really well to suggest that there's an encore, but I'm not sure it's appropriate. Okay. So thank you. What I'd like to do now is read out a message of support. It's from John Ashworth, Labour MP for Leicester South, who writes this. Fraternal greetings. The public sector cuts being pushed by this Tory Liberal government are too far, too fast, putting public services at risk and hitting public sector workers. They're certainly doing the latter. I'd also like to now introduce Rory Palmer, Deputy Mayor of Leicester. Thank you.
Let me first say this, that I'm proud to have members of my family taking part in this action today, not just in Leicester, but in other parts of the country as well. My family are a family of public sector workers all the way through the generations. And because I'm from a public sector family, a family of public sector workers, I know that each and every day when you go to work, whether you're teachers or civil servants, you do so because you keep your half of a very special deal. That deal is to serve the public. It's to make a difference to people's lives. It's to serve our communities, whether that's giving our young people the chance to succeed and achieve in the classroom, whether that's helping people in our job centres back into work, whether that's teaching adult learners in our skills centres. And that half the deal that you keep is very important, and it's more important when this government breaks their half of that deal, which has brought us here today. This action is justified. It is not irresponsible, nor is it unfair. Because this government are determined, in my view, to break their half of that deal. It's not just about pensions. It's about their half of the deal to pay you fairly, to treat you fairly, and to provide a decent set of terms and conditions. And in my view, what you're here demanding today is a fair settlement. It's not about gold-plated pensions. It's not an unfair set of demands. It's a perfectly reasonable argument which ought to be heard properly. And let's just say a word about the Hutton report. Because when you read the Hutton report, you can read it in different ways. And it is quite clear that George Osborne, Danny Alexander and the rest of them read it in a very particular way. Because if you read the report, it does not say that public sector pensions, fair public sector pensions, are not affordable. It doesn't say that. Public sector pensions are clearly something this government is choosing not to want to afford. This is an ideological choice this government are making. And it's the very same ideology that is driving many of their decisions and many of their cuts which are hitting the most vulnerable in communities across Leicester. The cutting of the educational maintenance allowance, quite literally taking money out of the pockets of some of the poorest children in our communities. Cutting the Future Jobs Fund, a programme that got young people back into work and training in places like Saffron Lane and Braunston, places where young people are struggling to find work and will find it even harder because of that decision. Cuts to tax credits, cuts to the Health in Pregnancy Grant, the Child Trust Fund, packages and policies which made a real difference to families across this city. And one of the most recent cuts, and one which will prove to be the most devastating if it is allowed to continue, cuts to the funding for ESOL classes in communities across Leicester. Those cuts will damage the life chances and the opportunities, and will also damage community relations and community cohesion in this city and cities like Leicester across the country. So this fight is so important. It's important not just for these 4 unions taking this action today, but it's important for families and communities and citizens across Leicester. And it's a fight which quite simply is not just a fight that must be won, it's a fight we cannot afford to lose. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to Rory. My stagecraft is not very good. Okay, thanks to Rory Palmer, and also thanks to John Ashworth for the message of support and solidarity. It is important to understand that some politicians are on our side, I think, even if at a national level that isn't always obvious. The next speaker is Ken Wheatley, who is a national executive member for ATL, and he's also on the executive committee of Midlands TUC. Okay, so this is Ken Wheatley. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. A very good afternoon to you all. To start with, I think this ought to say, beware crossing teachers. Thank you. I'd like to start on an up note. What is it that gets us out of bed each morning to go and teach? Why do we devote our time to the education service? I think, although it's frayed and tattered, it's the idealism that every teacher once had that keeps us going. And it's the children and the young people in our charge, who we are responsible for, that make us do just that. That is why it's important. They matter. That is why we do the job. And it's the job that is important. To teach for years needs commitment. And it's the commitment that the government is seriously getting wrong. Let me give you a quote from Michael Gove when he attended the ATL conference last year. This is what he said. You would work quite punishing hours. You would put up with a variety of different frustrations. But the guarantee would be that at the end of your time, that your pension would be relatively secure. You might not earn as much as your contemporaries, who were as well qualified as you. You accepted that. You had good degrees, they had good degrees. They went on to earn more, but you had the fulfilling career which brought you endless joy, and at the end of it, a decent pension pot. I think that part of this sort of broad contract that teachers expect is this. You came in on a certain basis, you should continue on that basis. Well, Mr. Gove, now we expect you to stick to your words. We expect you to take away the loaded gun of increased pension contributions, to undertake, over a year overdue, the valuation of the teachers' pension scheme, so that we have the information on whether or not it is in difficulty, and we can negotiate from there in good faith. If we, along with our colleagues in the other unions, fail to negotiate, and it will not be our fault, then for many years in the future, governments, whether they are red, blue or colour me beautiful mauve, will find a teaching profession that is alienated, disillusioned, cynical towards anything that the government put forward. A government can only negotiate and govern by consent, and only if they have the teaching profession on side and engaged can we deliver the world-class education that we want to. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ken. Okay. Pensions are sometimes described as an issue that only affects older people. This is not the case. And our next two speakers are two young people. Firstly, Rich Wrigley. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks Andy. Hi, I'm Rich Wrigley. I teach at Gateway Sixth Form College. I teach science, and I've been teaching for just under 2 years. Before I went into teaching, I did my bachelor's degree and my PGCE here in Leicester, where I racked up a huge debt in tuition fees, around the order of £20,000. The proposed pension changes are effectively a pay cut for young teachers such as myself. Thank you. My take-home pay would be dramatically reduced next year. I feel that this government treats young teachers like commodities and not professionals. Thank you. To that end, unfortunately, next year I will be leaving the UK to teach abroad, where I feel my skills will be more appreciated. And under the current situation, I don't know whether I'll return to the UK to teach. I do know, however, that the British education system is one of the best education systems in the world. But if it continues down this slope, we will fail to recruit young, enthusiastic, passionate teachers for the next generation of students. So please, cheers, thank you. So please, please, don't let David Cameron, Michael Gove, and the rest of them ruin our brilliant education system. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much to Rich. It's nerve-wracking being up here. You probably spotted that when I got PCS and UCU well confused. There's an awful lot of people from up here. I'm sure you, like me, are also seeing one or two people that you've not seen for a long time. I don't want to pick anybody out at random, but it was nice to see Ian and Dave Cross I've spotted somewhere as well. So this is the things that you can do when you're on the stage in front of a microphone. So nice to see you, Ian. Nice to see you, Dave. The next speaker is Becky Heaney, who's the organiser for Youth Fight for Jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, Youth Fight for Jobs, just to explain for people who haven't heard of our campaign, it was a campaign that was set up a few years ago to campaign against youth unemployment, attacks to education, and low pay and other attacks that young people suffer. We're supported by national trade unions such as the PCS, the UCU, so we work with the trade unions closely, and we just like to send full solidarity and support to all the workers on strike today to defend pensions, jobs and services. There's currently 200 million unemployed people in the world. 70 million of these are young people. In Spain, where they have 45% youth unemployment, nearly half of their young people cannot find a job. They refer to themselves as the no-no generation, no job, no house. And across Europe, other young people are stuck in low-paid jobs, receiving squeezed benefits, cuts to services, being priced out of education, but we are fighting back. We've seen across Europe, in Spain and Greece, young people on the streets refusing to accept the cutbacks that the governments are making. And in Britain, we've been doing the same. Just before Christmas, there was millions of students fighting back against the massive attacks on tuition fees, the cutting of the EMA, and other issues. And we're saying that there should be no to all cutbacks, no to mass youth unemployment, and for the right for young people to determine their own future. So this year, You Fight for Jobs is recreating the Jarrow March of 1936 in October. We'll be marching again from Jarrow to London to say to this government, 75 years after the original Jarrow March, we can still not have the decent right to a job. And what a failure of this system, what a failure of this government that it cannot provide something so basic to young people. The original Jarrow March, the marchers only got their £1 train fare to go back to Jarrow, and we're fighting for more. Together, linked up with the trade unions, we want to be having public meetings and protests in every town that we pass through on the way down to London, and a mass demonstration in London involving young unemployed people, students, workers, pensioners, everybody together against this government. Because we can see that young people are being used on slave labour schemes, working for free to undermine what trade unions have won over the past decades. We are seeing young volunteers being brought into schools to do jobs while they're sacking teachers. We're seeing people being brought in on agency work with no rights, often being paid minimum wage to do the work that public sector workers were previously doing but being sacked. So we're saying no to divisions between young people and workers. We want a united struggle all together. The other section of society that's also being hit hard by this government's cuts are women. It's majority women that work in the public sector, and particularly the pension reforms or the pension tax will have a negative effect on women. Young women suffer going into apprenticeships. They earn 21% less than male people in apprenticeships who already earn a pitiful wage for apprenticeships, often £2 an hour to work full time. The government is also cutting NHS services, benefits for single mothers, and predominantly women who are losing low-paid, insecure jobs. And Michael Gove, our good friend Michael Gove, a few days ago when he was condemning the teachers for coming out on strike, said the teachers' strike will cause massive inconvenience to hard-working families, particularly to hard-working women. There's no irony there from Michael Gove, but here's a tax on the pensions would have a massive, massive inconvenience to hard-working people and hard-working women. So we need men and women, young and old, to come together and refuse to pay for a crisis that we did not cause. So the next step needs to be, after today, that we all come out together, all of the public sector trade unions out together to show that we're not going to take these attacks. And You Fight for Jobs will be standing shoulder to shoulder with workers in action, so together we can fight for a better society, run for the millions and not the millionaires. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. One of the things, as I said, there's certain privileges from being on the stage. One of the things is that I can see a number of banners over to my right. One is the University of Leicester, and the other one says knowledge is power, De Montfort University, unity is strength, UCU. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Di Campbell, who is Chair of UCU at Leicester College. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, you'll just have to bear with me. I'm going to keep it very brief. Everyone's been talking about the government, and the government's talking about us all being in it together. Let me tell you, and let us tell the government, we are all in this together, and they need to watch out. I don't think there's another message I need to send. Thank you.
Okay, short and sweet. The message from all speakers has been very similar. We're not to blame. Public services are important. We need to look after our pensions because the government clearly won't. One of the things that's been mentioned is the Hutton report. It's interesting to know that if you search the Hutton report with the term unaffordable, you won't find anything, because Hutton did not conclude that public sector pensions were unaffordable. The reason why we're facing the cuts, as has been said by a number of speakers, purely ideological. It is not driven by a financial audit of what can and can't be afforded. And if the government wants to be ideological in attacking our pensions, we can be strong and united in defending our pensions and in defending public sector services. I, like everybody else, am tired for having to justify public sector workers and the valuable jobs that we do, without which society would be the kind of avaricious place that we have nightmares about. It's not the kind of society that we want, and we're also sure that it's not the kind of society that the general public wants. Now we're moving towards the end of the speakers, but I would like to invite people to stay, because we do have some musical entertainment lined up, including a jazz band, a folk singer, and a group, and I will read out their own description of themselves to try and entice you. This is a group called the Splitters, and they describe themselves as bouncier than a jelly on a bouncy castle in an earthquake. So it seems to me that they will be pretty bouncy. But I'd like to do two things finally. The first thing is that events like this don't happen accidentally. I've said to a number of people today that coming up with the ideas for events like this is easy. Organising it on the end of a phone to organisations all over the place is another kettle of fish. And one of the things I'd really like to do is to thank Jenny Day for her unstinting organisational ability and efforts in organising what you see today. I think there's absolutely no question that if it hadn't been for Jenny's input, this wouldn't have happened. The weather's been on our side, which has helped. But the main reason why this has been a successful event has been two reasons. Firstly, Jenny's hard work, and secondly, because of everybody here today who's turned up. And we hope, as I said, that you'll stay till this afternoon. The final message, I suppose, from the stage formally, is that what we're going to watch now is a very short message from the National Union of Teachers General Secretary, Christine Blower. Like many national politicians and union general secretaries, she can't be everywhere. Technology can, so we've got a DVD, which is the next best thing. And we've got the biggest TV screen you've probably ever seen in your life. I wish I had a house where it could fit on the wall. But my name's not David Cameron. One final comment. In it together, I'm sure that colleagues from other trade unions know what their average pensions are, how little they are. The average pension for a teacher is around about 10,000, gold-plated, cast in stone. The average salary for an MP is 21,000. So when people tell me that everybody's in it together, I just don't believe them. I'm also minded of Christine Blower's comment about the people on the Titanic, where everybody was in it together, except people in first class got off. People in steerage died. They were in it together. So I think it's time to continue this struggle and carry on fighting. And finally, a word from Christine Blower. Thank you very much, and hang around for the music.
Colleagues, as I can only be in one place at one time, I'm delighted to have made this short message to send greetings to you wherever you are in England and Wales, out on strike today in order to protect and defend teachers' pensions. Pensions that we all know are fair, affordable and sustainable. Thank you very much for being at this meeting today. It may very well take a lot more action in order to win our cause, but we all know that this cause is just. That's why we've been joined by people from other unions and so many other voices saying we need fair pensions for all in the public sector, in the private sector and the state pension. Thank you for what you've been doing in the campaign. I look forward to working with you going on from this to make sure that we really do win. Fair pensions for all, colleagues. Together we can win.